Hi. Today I'm going to talk about Embrel, the largest selling biologic in total revenues as of 2008, $7.4 billion in sales. And just as important, the evolution of Immunex, the company that discovered it. I will show you a chart of some basic biotech knowledge that you have to have, and then a timeline of Immunex from its inception up until it sold themselves to Amgen. Here's the chart. It's a couple of basic things. Here we have a couple of charts. The top one is on Biotech Financing 101. Biotechnology companies are just small pharmaceutical companies unencumbered by revenues. Biotech fund drug research and development almost entirely with investors' money. A great deal of investors' money. Costs a lot to bring a drug to market, as you can see by this lower chart. The first 4 to 6 years is just clinical tests in the laboratory on laboratory animals to see if the drug has any potential. And a lot of them never get beyond that point. And then if they do, it could take 6 to 8 years of going through the FDA approval process. And the total cost? Upwards to $1 billion. $1 billion with a B. It's very costly, and only about 1 in 10 drugs get approved. So that's a lot of cost for not a lot of drugs getting approved. So you can see where by the time you get a drug and have to pay for it, you're not happy to pay the price, but these companies are trying to develop these things, put out a lot of money to begin with. So, and on to the next chart. This chart is a timeline history of Immunex and its development of Embrel. The company was started in July of '81, established by Stephen Gillis, Christopher Henney, and Steve Duzin. Gillis and Henney were the scientists in charge of developing candidates for drugs, and Stephen Duzin was the businessman to essentially drum up the money they needed to get these things off the ground and underway. And from 81 through 91, when leukine for autologous bone marrow transplant was approved, and they didn't get a lot of revenues from that. But that was an 11-year period, or 10-year period actually, where they had really no revenues. They had an IPO, it's one way of raising money, and as you can see in '83, they realized $63 million in that, but they were probably going through $10 million a year just to fund their developing candidates. And if you go down the list, in '92, that's when preclinical studies showed TNF receptor Embrel turned off the inflammatory response in animals in arthritis and septic shock. That means it worked on the animals, but let's see what it does for humans. And through that time they needed a lot of money to fund those developments, and they weren't getting a lot, even with leukine approved. That wasn't bringing in a lot of money. So from '92 through Embrel was finally approved in November of '98 for the treatment of moderate to severe rheumatoid arthritis. And in May of '99 it was approved for juvenile RA. It's also been approved for psoriasis also. And at the very bottom you'll see that the company was adding 1,000 patients a week to a waiting list. Why there was a waiting list was because they couldn't produce enough Embrel. In 2000, The company could have sold upwards to $1 billion worth of Embrel, but they couldn't manufacture enough of it. They left $250 million on the table. They just couldn't produce it. So they had a shortage, and not even contract manufacturing that's using somebody else's facilities. They were still couldn't produce enough of it. So that was a major problem that they had to overcome. So Immunex and Embrel became a major success story, but not without challenges along the way. I mean, it's gone from an idea into a scientist's head, with a businessman drumming up funding, to where it is today, selling, as of 2008, $7.4 billion in total sales. That's great. But as I said, along the way, you've had your problems of getting financing and keeping the business growing. So I'll read this to you. To shepherd a drug through the intimidating FDA gamut, a company typically had to invest millions of dollars to complete its own tests and striving to comply with federal regulations. To help bring their drugs and technology to market, therefore, many biotech startups sought other avenues of profit. Common routes included selling and licensing proprietary technology to large pharmaceutical companies, or partnering with bigger competitors to develop and market the drugs. Just raising money alone usually doesn't do it. You need help from other pharmaceutical and biotech companies. That you have milestones that payments are made on. If you hit a certain point of success, it kicks in some extra payments to the company to keep it funded. Immunex managed to stay solvent and continue to fund its research and development arm during the 80s, in essence by selling its technology to companies that had the financial backing to take it to market. So they were selling whatever they could sell. They were selling their ideas and their technologies just to keep funded, to keep this process going along. Unable to generate acceptable proceeds from the sale of more stock, Steve Duzin arranged a number of deals that benefited Immunex. He negotiated with some large American and European drug companies, selling and marketing and manufacturing rights to most major immune system stimulants that it had cloned. Through the 80s, Immunex developed a number of promising technologies, most of which it sold or licensed to other companies. As fees and royalties income increased, revenues rose steadily to about $2.4 million in 1985, $11.3 million in '87, and $23.3 in '89. But they were still losing money. In a series of bold and complex deals initiated in 1989, Duzin reacquired, sold, swapped the rights to a number of its drugs. The end result was Immunex by 1990 was in a position to possibly begin marketing its own technology. In this business, you've got to become a marketing organization, Duzin said in an April 15, 1990 Seattle Times article, because that's the only way you can get enough cash to sustain your research. It's not just about the drugs, it's about funding your research into it. As it's been stated here, that you have no revenue, you have no income. You have to find ways and different ways to get income. Not just the IPO wasn't enough, and selling extra shares of stock wasn't enough. So they had to sell whatever they could and sign on with partners, and eventually they signed on with American Home Products, which eventually became Wyatt. American Cyanamide was in there along the way too. So as you can see, this is not a very easy process to do. And it's more about raising the money to keep yourself afloat than anything else. And even with all of that, in 2000, by the time it was approved for about a year and a half, they couldn't manufacture enough. They didn't have enough manufacturing facilities. So in my next part, I'm going to be talking about the manufacturing facilities, how it's made and the problems with it, and what it costs to manufacture these biologics. See you next time. Bye.